Welcome, Spartans, to Halo Book Club, part of Evolved, your home for Halo. Halo Book Club goes beyond the video games and covers Halo's extended media lore from the novels, short stories, comic books, and more.
It's time for Halo Book Club!
On today's episode, I will be your host, Lucas, and today with me is Aaron.
Hi, guys.
It's just the two of us. It has become the Lucas and Aaron show, I feel like, the last few weeks.
It has. We have slowly taken over everything. We will be leading a coup shortly to secure Evolved's future. Stay tuned for more details. Everyone's been a bit busy this last while. Oren is still busy doing proper fancy TV movie stuff. Every so often I check in his Instagram story and I'm like, oh, Oren does more things. But David has resurfaced. I am kidnapping him tomorrow night to record some episodes as well. I'm also potentially kidnapping Ian soon, so things are afoot.
Okay, yeah, we'll get back in the swing of things. So this book club, we are doing the Halo Fractures short story, Promises to Keep. So this is a nice small short story. It is voiced by the lovely Scott Brick, and I always enjoy his narrations. I can never go wrong with Scott Brick. Before we get started, let's go through the socials. If you're new to the show, welcome. Halo Book Club is a part of Evolve that hosts other Halo shows. It's a sub-show of Podcast Evolved. We do Mission Debrief, Builds of Blocks, Halo TV Plus, Halo Gear Guide, and Halo Headlines. Evolved also partners with HCS Pro Talk, a podcast where Josh and Will discuss the latest information within the competitive Halo scene, with an emphasis on community every week. You can learn more about each show at Evolve's website, evolvedhalo.com. If you're already a fan of the show, we ask you to rate us and leave us a review on your podcast platform of choice. We greatly appreciate all the feedback we receive from our listeners to improve the quality of our shows. We also would like to take this moment to thank all of our patrons for their continued support. Your contributions allow us to continue making new content like this every week and allow us to keep recording, and hopefully we will get more books soon. So thank you guys all so very much.
Yes, thank you guys very much. If we do not get some books soon, I will start reading out the cookbook one recipe at a time.
Yes, we will have 5-minute episodes, just one recipe at a time. But you better not fluff it like all these YouTube instructional videos do. You just got to get straight to the point.
What if we just record my audio from the kitchen as I attempt to cook each meal and have a nervous breakdown? That could make for an interesting show.
That could be an interesting episode. So, all right. So if you are not subscribed, our patrons received a variety of exclusive rewards such as early episodes, unique swag, access to our podcast soundtrack, and more. You can head over to patreon.com/HaloEvolved to learn more. And finally, we encourage our listeners to support Audible, where they can enjoy the growing collection of Halo novels, all in one place, along with thousands of other novels, guided wellness programs, and more. Use the URL audibletrial.com/podcastevolved to learn more and start your free trial today. Any audiobook recommendations, Aaron?
Actually, yes, I do, while we think about it. I downloaded the Lord of the Rings books. It turns out, I think last year they redid the audio version, so I think when I looked before it was like, there was like the BBC dramatised radio show and there was another audiobook version, but now, I think last year they got Andy Serkis to narrate all 3 books.
Who is Andy?
Andy Serkis is Gollum.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's pretty cool.
Andy Serkis, he does all that CGI stuff. He was Caesar in the Planet of the Apes. He's also the guy that stole the vibranium out of Wakanda, if you're trying to think of a face. I forget what his character is in the Marvel universe as well, but he does a whole lot of stuff. So he's very good with his voice work in that. So I've been enjoying it so far. I'm still only on Fellowship of the Ring. We've only made it as far as getting to the elves. No spoilers. I'm trying to think, actually. I am quite far into it, but yet not that far into it.
There is I watched a YouTube video recently where he took the Fellowship of the Ring and it compared the books to the movies, and when they leave like the Shire, like it takes them years before they leave the Shire. It's not as what's it called? It's not as like quick as they are in the movies, where it's almost like a few days go by and stuff just happens.
It's a long time. There's a lot of singing. There's a whole thing with a character called Tom Bombadil that I'm very, very glad it's not in the movie. That's all I'm going to say. I'm glad we missed all of that, but still pretty good. So that's my recommendation at the minute. If you want, download those, have a listen. I decided I would give those a go. I'm catching up on TV stuff, but I want to watch the Lord of the Rings show when it's all out. I don't want to watch week to week, so I figured I would watch a few other things. So I'm watching Stranger Things at the minute. Then I'm going to catch up on the Obi-Wan Star Wars show. And then by that stage, the Lord of the Rings show should be finished. And I'll watch all of that. And then hopefully by the time that's done, all of Game of Thrones will be out. So I'll only have to subscribe to that service for 1 month and binge all of it. I have a plan. It's logical.
Very smart.
So that's my audiobook recommendation.
I want to get through Rick and Morty as well. That's the new season for that came out. And so all of the guys at work are like, oh, you got to watch the new Rick and Morty. So I'm probably going to have to binge watch, because I only watched like the first 2 seasons. So I'm going to have to catch up on that show.
Yeah, I think I watched whatever was available here at the time, like 3 seasons or 4 seasons or something. But I'll have to watch the new stuff as well. But I have a massive, terrible backlog of TV that I may or may not get round to, because I've been telling myself I will for years, but oh well.
It's like your video game collection too.
Yeah, pretty much. I just uninstalled a whole load of things I knew I was never going to play, and I just made peace with that. Right, will we dive into this book club?
Yes. Do you want to?
I will go through, our info, and then we can get stuck into this. So, like we said at the top of the show, this book is called Promises to Keep. It is a short story from Halo Fractures. It was written by Christie Golden. It was published by Gallery Books. It's available in all forms, print, digital, and audio. Fractures was released on the 20th of September 2016. Wow. 6 years ago.
Oh, Jesus.
Doesn't feel like it, but it is. I did not have a page count because I listened to the audio version, but it was an hour and a half long. I'm guessing this is 60 pages? That seems like a ballpark figure off the top of my head.
I can see 60 pages.
It's quite a substantial short story. Let's see. We have a little quick summary here that says that the story takes place in the closing days of known Forerunner history following the events of Greg Bear's The Forerunner Saga, as a group of surviving Forerunners embark on a perilous journey to the devastated capital world of the Ecumen in order to restore the domain. Due to the revelation of splendid dust of the ancient suns being tragic solitude, it has narrative connections to Halo Hunters in the Dark. This takes place a few centuries after 92,421 BCE, but I have no exact date, but I just know it's a few centuries later because they're just about to finish the reseeding efforts.
Yeah, they don't really mention an actual date, but like crazy to think that they're still living a few centuries, and like we barely live more than a century at max.
Oh yeah, like that's nothing to them. That's a few years in Forerunner terms, really. The main locations for this are the Ark and Maethrillian. The main characters we come across is good old Born Stellar makes eternal lasting. He is the Isodidact. We have Chanta Green. She is the Life Shaper. After the librarian bites the dust. We have, now, how do they pronounce this in the audiobook? Because I am about to say Abaddon.
I thought it was Abaddon.
Abaddon, that's it. Because I go to say Abaddon, but it's Abaddon.
Yeah, that's because I just listened to it today, so.
But I keep getting the two confused. This is the same thing as how I never knew how to pronounce the old Covenant species names, and I read them wrong in my head, and for years it was impossible to not say them the wrong way in the podcast, and I hated myself for it. So, Abaddon, we will get there. We have Growth Through Trial of Change, Splendid Dust of Ancient Suns, and then we have a few red shirts. So we have Glory of a Far Dawn, Keeper of Stone Songs, Walking in Light of Falling Stars, Finder of Things Hidden, and Sorrow for Lost Voices. They are the red shirts for this episode.
Jeez, Forerunner names get really long.
Do like some of them are very good though. I do like the erudite act's full name, which is Shadow of a Sundered Star.
That one's pretty easy to say, but like some of them, like Splendid Dust of Ancient Suns or Walking in Light of Falling Stars, or just get a little long.
Yeah, but like Born Stellar makes Eternal Lasting. Quite a good name. Although Born Stellar also quite good. So this is the full cast of characters. We get a few other people mentioned here and there, but not really worth talking about. I've sort of divided this book into a couple of rough chapter bullet points, and I'll just sort of go through each one and we can shout at anything that catches our interest here. When we join the Isodidact and Chant, they are about to finish reseeding the galaxy. They are on to their last species, it's the Sanshayum. They're about to release them from cryo and start the rehabilitation process.
Before that, there is I think it's maybe a minute or two where they're talking about, it's right as the Isodidact and the Librarian reach the Ark, because there's a point where the Master Builder discusses putting all the humans on a halo ring.
Oh, he's yes, this is part of what's going on here. He's having these holographic flashbacks. He's reliving his old memories while he's on the Ark of when the Librarian was alive. So while he's here in the real world and they're getting ready to reseed the Sanshayum and everything else, he's sitting in his chamber reliving his memories in holographic form. So he's actually remembering the last time he was with the Librarian. And this is when they were going to... That would be the Major Ark? They arrive at the Major Ark, they're moving the humans onto the Halo. This is before the Didact would have come and composed them, and then the Ark would have been attacked by Mending Bias. Or it would have been attacked by the... No, it would have been attacked by Mending Bias then after, yeah. But that was after they attacked Maethrillian, so... This is he's having this memory, he's having this flashback. He talks about his regrets that the last conversation they had was sort of utilitarian and to the point and a little bit tense.
And it wasn't really a loving goodbye. It was kind of I got more, we got things to do, I'll see you later sort of a thing.
Yeah, and he talks about how he's sort of widowed by the death of another man's wife, and I thought that was kind of a nice little thing. It's you care for this woman, but she's not your wife. You're not her husband. You're just the copy. He's having he's sort of reliving these memories, but he's also mentions how it's finally clicked in his heart that she's gone, because he talks about how he knew rationally she was dead, but he kept reliving these holograms just to see her, and then one day his escapism doesn't work. And he's frantically going through the files, realising he's at the end of it, and he has no more recorded memories of the Librarian. And then it clicks on him and he goes, oh, actually, there's something in my junk folder. He pulls up the junk folder and goes oh yeah, there was one last message sent to me from the Librarian. But she never would have said that. But what if it was? So he opens this file and plays it. And then he's oh shit. And then he goes and he gets Chant agreeing, and then they watch the video, and then he gathers up the rest of the Forerunners. Yeah, so turns out for a couple of 100 years, I completely ignored this very important message that my dead ex-lover sent me.
It's weird that you're just after, hundreds of years, you're oh yeah, I might as well just do this message to see what's going on. What's the worst? I feel that's a long time to wait in it.
Yeah, I feel he sort of tries to say, it's a moment of desperation, and he was convinced this message was a trick by the Flood, so he didn't open it. I suppose he could have been afraid that it was semi-composed Librarian before the halos went off. He just didn't open it, he didn't look at it, he filed it away, but now it's here. And then he actually finds out that it's a message she sent to them with Catalog, who was with her on Earth before the halos fired, basically saying that, yeah, the Flood told me the truth. When you fire the Halos, it's actually going to destroy the domain, because the domain is actually the Organon, and it is on Maethrillian. We've had it all along. It's been right under our nose. And when you destroy it, the Urdidact, who is locked away in Requiem, is going to go insane, because he's not going to have the domain there to rehabilitate him. He's just going to be locked away in a cryptum with his own thoughts.
That's just wild. So he's been going on for hundreds of years at this point of his own thoughts. That's like, I don't know. I can imagine this is why he went absolutely insane, or he was absolutely evil at the end of, or the beginning of Halo 4, because essentially if the Isodidact would have probably read this message earlier, they could have probably stopped some of that from actually happening. And he wouldn't probably be as evil as he was in trying to compose all of humanity.
To be honest, someone really should have just gone to Requiem and flushed him at that stage. Like, that would have been the humane thing to do. Is like, we'll not let him out. We're just going to put his cryptum in the sun, and it's for the best. And save a whole lot of trouble, because, like, it just really would be better for him. But yeah, no, this is what they then figure out. So they make a plan. They've already been deciding as Forerunners what they're going to do when they're finished reseeding the galaxy. And they've all agreed the best thing to do is to leave the galaxy and stop interfering. Up until this stage, they hadn't really thought about it too hard, because they had species to reintroduce, work to do. But now that they're on the last species, they suddenly realise, oh, actually we need a plan now for the next step. So they're like, right, we'll go back to Maethrillian, we'll get some more ships, we'll get the slipspace crystal shards for fuel, and then we're going to go off and leave the galaxy. But while we're there, we'll take a look for the Organon, and we will attempt to repair the domain while we're here. They grab the Audacity, they take the crew of red shirts, and they go back to Maethrillian. And they talk about the debris field from the battle, and how battered the planet is, and how it's completely shut down and lifeless.
They were also talking about, like, they were showing all the ships in, like, the ship bays, and they were saying, like, how there were so many of them that were still in their bays, and it's like, they could have left. But then they were mentioning how, like, the crystal shards that they used to power their ships were not any of those ships. So there just wasn't time to get them from the storage place, put it in a ship, and get these people out. So it was wild.
They basically say this was the capital they never expected to have to evacuate, so they didn't think to store the fuel with the ships. They do mention that the crystal store, I think, what did they say? That there's enough crystal fuel there for 10,000 ships for 100,000 years.
Something like that.
Because this is, if you remember back to Point of Light, it's a similar crystal shard that Guilty Spark takes the crew of the Ace of Spades to get, and he helps use that and a seed crystal to enhance the Ace of Spades. So it's like the best human ship in existence now. So these are the same crystals. Like, if you could get one of these and a seed crystal and slap them in the infinity, you would have made like an Uber ship.
That would have been awesome. The other thing that was crazy was the that splendid Dust of Ancient Suns, the first counselor. He has this key that, like, unlocks, it's what he calls it a deadbolt. It's like a deadbolt key, and it's part of his, like, uniform, or like his, like, gown or whatever. And I don't know, that, like, all these counselors just have all these secrets and all these, like, cool it all kind of reminds me of the Covenant, where, like, the prophets, like the prelates, like, they were made illegally, I guess, if you would say. Like, they were made with stuff that was given to them by the Forerunners that they're not really supposed to touch and do with. So, but the prophets were like, yeah, we're going to keep all this stuff and do secret things on our own. And that kind of reminds me of what the council is like for the Forerunners.
Yeah, and then all this stuff that they have, Dust tells them, oh yeah, no, we have all this stuff locked away in a vault called the Mysterium. You're like, oh, that sounds dodgy. And then they get there and they basically find out it's the Forerunner equivalent of the warehouse in Indiana Jones. Just never ending rows and rows and rows of all these things. Born Stellar's walking through the halls going like, oh yeah, the answers to everything is in this locked away. And then they find out that the Organon, Dust basically tells them, oh yeah, they found the Organon years ago. It helped the ancient Forerunners commune with the domain, and we took the entire device and we built all of Maethrillian around it. We transported the whole device here, we built it around it. We then tried to have everyone forget about it. What happened was that Abaddon, which is the AI that lives in the domain, sort of like the guardian of the domain, his name gets corrupted over time and rumours and becomes Organon. And then this becomes like the ancient precursor treasure that Born Stellar's actually on the treasure hunt for at the very start of the Forerunner trilogy. It all comes full circle again. But then we find out it's actually been here the entire time. So they go first to get the crystals, then they get to the ship bay. When they arrive at the ship bay, there's a recorded message from a counsellor who was trapped in the ship bay and sealed the doors and wouldn't let the people evacuate because he knew there was nowhere to escape to and they were all going to die. And then everything shuts down, the ship shuts down, and then Abaddon announces himself to the crew, and basically the power of his voice like causes them all to drop to their knees in pain, asks who they are. And then they realise, oh, we're stuck here now. We've got 3 days worth of air and supplies in our suits. But we need to figure this out because we can't get away.
It didn't seem like, when listening to it today, it didn't seem like they were like in actual pain. It was like they were in like fear and like, because they're talking about like everyone's skin kind of went, like, you know, when your skin goes pale because you're so afraid. It was kind of the same concept. I'm sitting here like, I don't know, maybe they're just not used to something that terrifying.
I don't know. You see, it was, I think the didact says he just bites his tongue so that he doesn't scream out. So that was my thought, was, oh, this is like actually physically painful for them to experience this as he shouts at them because he's so like large and powerful.
I can see that.
They get onto the shield, or the shield world's a bit of an understatement, but they get onto Maethrillian. They're making their way towards the council chamber. And then they come across these like spidery creatures. And then they realise, oh, these aren't spider creatures. These are like butchered, bastardized versions of crawlers, but a sort of organic crawler that Abaddon has created.
Yeah, they were different. And the isodidact like specifically points out, like, he's like, I know they're different because I am the one who created them. So I know these are not what they're supposed to look like.
And they were never on Maethrillian because he created them later, so they shouldn't be here, but yet they are. So they fight their way through them, they make their way to the chamber. Abaddon then reveals himself in giant holographic form. If you've seen the Halo Encyclopedia, we have an image for him, but basically imagine a giant glowy holographic version of the Guardian. That's what he looks like, this sort of skeletal, serpenty, winged creature. He reveals himself, he tells them there's going to be a trial, they're going to answer for their crimes against the domain. Dust and his 2 red shirts, who are Glory of a Far Dawn and Keeper of Stone Songs, they both stay for the trial, and the rest of the team jump down the lift shaft basically and head to the bottom to continue looking for Abaddon's core. They eventually come across it in the Mysterium, they unlock it, they get inside. Born Stellar describes this majestic structure, and there's a small version of Abaddon's hologram in the doorway, and they're talking to him, and he basically says, yeah, no, you guys are gonna stand trial anyway. And then Finder of Things and Sorrow of Lost Voices both go poof into piles of dusty powder. Abaddon looks at the didact and then reveals that actually the majestic structure is a big slagged molten heap. There's one like central stone column left, and this is like the damaged remains of the Organon and Abaddon's core and the domain. So Chant takes Dust's key and you have to slot it into the pedestal, and she has this sneaking suspicion that it's going to be fatal. Dust had the same idea. She tries to get to the pedestal while Abaddon's trying to restrain them, but at the last minute, Growth through Trial of Change basically smacks her in the head with her rifle, takes the key and inserts it into the pedestal. She disappears in a big glowy flash of starlight, and then Abaddon goes quiet and Maethrillian comes back to life all by itself.
and it's weird because I feel like they kind of almost hinted at Trial maybe having an important part, because they mentioned how she was older than all of the other life shapers. However, she was a newer life shaper because she was a builder rate until she was a life shaper rate. And like I feel like they talked about her a little bit more than they talked about any of the other Forerunner characters, besides the ones we already know about, Chant and Born Stellar. And so I felt she had some sort of important role. So I was surprised that it happened when I first listened to it, but at the same time I was like, okay, this is where this is her sacrifice to the greater good.
They do sort of set her up to be the one, she is the one capable of change and development, and you're like, right, well, it kind of makes sense that she would be the one to upload herself to Abaddon to change, develop, and repair him. Last of the crew gather back up, they go back to the Audacity, they get their other 2 ships, and then they're back on the Ark, and Chant and Born Stellar are talking to Dust about what happened, and Dust basically says, yeah, no, we fucked everything up all over the place, so I have a plan. He's like, I want to stay here on the Ark to be the guide for humanity in the future for the Reclaimers. I want to help them on their way to claiming the mantle, so I want to become a monitor. Born Stellar ends up agreeing. They turn him into a monitor and he becomes Tragic Solitude, which we learn then is the AI that we never knew about, because we never actually encounter him in Halo 3, and the only time we get mention of him is in Hunters in the Dark, and at that stage he's suffered the same fate as Guilty Spark and gone insane.
And he becomes a bad guy.
Yep, he never actually gets to serve his purpose. And then the rest of the Forerunners gather up onto their ships, make their plans, make their final preparations, and then they head off out into somewhere.
Isn't there I know it's the end of it, isn't there a kind of like an after story? Like, isn't there another short story where I know because it's Chant and the Isodidact.
Yes, it's the little short story at the very end of Untitled Story.
Yeah. And so they're kind of, because they also did mention in the actual Promises to Keep in the beginning of it, where Chant and the Isodidact kind of had like a fling. They had like a, not even a one night stand. They were kind of like friends with benefits, mourning over the death of the librarian. And then they cut it off. And I guess after this, they reconciled.
I think really Born Stellar's like, am I like trying to fill the void in my life from the loss of the librarian, the wife I never had, with her, chosen heir? And then eventually realize, no, we like each other in our own right. So they like get together. And that's the final thing they talk about, is like, maybe we'll go to a world somewhere where we won't need our armor and we can just be ourselves. And then you cut to the little untitled short story at the very end, which catches up with Chant and Born Stellar, and they're on this world. They have a child together, they're farming, and then Born Stellar basically goes for a little walk back to the Audacity that's parked up and has a look at his armor in storage and just thinks about life and how things are. We don't know when that takes place either, but I like to hope that that's modern day Halo. I like to hope he's still out there somewhere.
If only. Do they live that long? I don't remember how long they're supposed to, Forerunners are supposed to last.
Well, the Erdidact was born in 110,225 BCE, and by this time at 97,400, he's now in the Cryptum, so he was about 10,000 years old, closer to 15. At the stage they locked him in the Cryptum, and he wasn't that old when they let him out again. He was still in the prime of his life. I think there's there's really not much of an upper limit on a Forerunner with armor. And even without armor, I think they're quite long-lived, so they could easily, I think, live out to still be alive now. There are Forerunners, I would assume, still out there in the universe hiding.
I could see that.
Overall thoughts?
It's a good little short story. Definitely ties up. There's not much in the way of story between when, the Halo fires and humanity. What's it called? And humanity becomes like a spacefaring race. Like there's not much in between. So so they kind of have some fillers that kind of, it talks about the reseeding of the galaxy and, you know, what happened to all these Forerunners that were left on the Ark. Because, you know, after the Halo fire, there were still some alive.
Yeah, so like you get this, you get Halo Rebirth. That's another short story that was originally like a secret chapter that Chloe Burr wrote, and it used to be hidden on Halopedia or on Halo Waypoint, and they released that recently. You can get the free PDF version, and it's on YouTube as well. That's another little short bit, and then like up until then, the only other thing was the ancient part of Broken Circle. Like that's the oldest Halo lore between the firing of the Halos, this stuff, and then modern day Halo. It's like the formation of the Covenant. There sort of isn't anything in between those two. That's it. So this is nice. I would love some more Forerunner stuff, but I suppose then you would be filling in the blanks of what happened to Born Stellar and Shant when they went off out into the galaxy or other galaxies.
We could probably, you know, do something not related. I don't know, maybe there could be some book about the Didac and one of his battles against humanity, or, you know, some things like that are more kind of like a prequel to the Forerunner trilogy.
I don't know what else I would really want at this stage, because we've got so much of the missing pieces. It used to be stuff like I would have wanted to know about the precursors and that, but I feel like we got a lot of that with Point of Light. We got sort of the mist stuff and everything.
And at the end of the day, the stories are mostly about like the modern day Halo stuff. Like, so this is some good backstories and some good filler stuff, but we don't need like another 30 books about the Prometheans.
The fact that we struggle to like think too much about where we'd want the gaps filled in is a testament to just how good the Forerunner trilogy is. Like, they hit so many points and they cover so much so well. You're like, yeah, they really didn't leave much left that would really like do it. There's the odd room for a short story here and there. Like, if you gave me something this length about Shant and Born Stellar, I would take a bit of that. If you gave me a story about maybe something a similar length about the precursors running from the ancient Forerunners and creating the Flood from the precursor point of view, that might be cool, but I don't think I need a full big story.
No, I agree with you.
For myself, like, I enjoy this. It's a pretty good story. It's nice to get back to Maethrillian, to know that there is stuff out there. There's the possibility of finding the crystal shards and the Forerunner ships and the rest of it all just stored away there, like this treasure trove of stuff.
I would say Maethrillian is still there, so like humanity and stuff can still find it, so like that's still a possibility.
Is it one of the lines at the very end of this, or else it's somewhere else? But I think one of the last things they do is like seal up Maethrillian, so like it's just a planet out there somewhere.
Oh yeah, because it looks like they kind of close it. Pretty sure it's this one. They kind of close it up so it doesn't look like the weird slices that they...
Yeah, it's there's artwork of it now. It used to be kind of hard to picture, but it's basically sliced into... They're not segments, it's just like plates that slide out, but it can all seal back up into a ball again. So somewhere out there's just this
Halo Death Star.
Yeah, and then it's gonna split open. That's one of my favourite pieces of artwork someone drew. It's just George adrift in space after the slip space incident above Maethrillian. It's just like, there's a book I want.
Of course it is.
I know. I have to get that in occasionally somewhere, just to keep everything going. Right, we have a little bit of trivia. Not much to talk about, but just a little bit. Like we said, the Guardians appear to be modelled after Abaddon. When you see the artwork in the Halo Encyclopedia, you'll know what I mean. It's also on Halopedia if you don't have the encyclopedia. Abaddon is the Hebrew word for destroyer or destruction, and is also the name of an angel turned demon in the Bible, and the Organon is the name of the collection of Aristotle's 6 works on logic. So they are all real things.
Halo just loves to make biblical references.
They do, like all sorts of ancient references. Like you hear things and you think like, oh, Cortana's a cool name, then you find out no, Cortana's a name from an ancient poem. Roland, all these other things. Like, oh, right, everything's a reference to something way above my knowledge base.
But it's really cool to like find them and like look up like their origins and stuff, and you're like, yeah, that's and even we did it was the audio drama for Halo Infinite, and the number sequence or something like that for the character, the Oni agent, was like based on a word, and like even things like that are just like they like to put in all these little Easter eggs.
Oh yeah, it's amazing sometimes the detail and the things you can figure out. Those were our little bits of trivia. I don't think there's really anything else to talk about. It's a good solid story. It's worth a read. I think it adds a little bit extra to that part of the timeline between the end of Silentium and Rebirth and then this.
I agreed. So I will go ahead and close this out now. So thank you all for joining us. Like we mentioned at the top of the show, you can find every episode of Evolved's shows on our website, evolvedhalo.com. Again, it also features links to our Discord server, Facebook group, Patreon page, Xbox Live Club, and other contact information. Once again, another special shout out to all of our patrons for supporting the show and making all of this possible. Head to patreon.com/HaloEvolved to learn more. And finally, if you want to leave us a voicemail about this episode or a previous episode or anything else Halo related, you can give us a call at 205-EVOLVED. That is 205-386-5833. And with that, I have been your host, Lucas, and until next time, evolved.
Evolve.
Evolve.